Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's panel, where we're going to be discussing the IMF's Resilience and Sustainability Trust. I'm sure most of you know what it is, but for those of you who don't, it aims to provide low-income and vulnerable middle-income countries with finance to help address longer-term challenges such as climate change. My name's Simon Jessup, editor of Sustainable Finance at Reuters, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce my panelists for today. To my right, Bo Li, Deputy Managing Director of the IMF. Next to him, Frans Tatenbach, Minister of Environment and Energy of Costa Rica. And at the end, Samba Thiam, Ambassador and High-Level Coordinator for Mauritania's RST program. And there's going to be some time at the end for your questions, so please do think of them as we go along, and I'll try and leave 10 minutes. So it gives me great pleasure to kick off with Bo. I think you'd like to say a few words before I get to my questions. Bo.
Thank you very much, Simon. Maybe just very quickly to lay the background, RST is the first long-term lending instrument created by the IMF. And it is very special because we are the only macro lender in this space. That is, we are lending to support low-income country, middle-income country in their macro policy reforms, such as public financial management, fiscal policy, financial sector policy, and also macro-critical sectoral policies. And so far, we have raised $48 billion, and we have supported 20 countries. And Costa Rica is the first country that has graduated from RST. And Mauritania is also one of the early recipients of RST support. I stop here for now.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Bo. Frans, I don't know if you wanted to say a few words at the start.
Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. This was, yes, we were very thrilled and happy to announce this in Sharm el-Sheikh. It was approved in November 2022. And I think it was in Sharm el-Sheikh that we announced very proudly that we had achieved total approval for the Sustainable Risk Trust project, which is to aim at reforming long-term, like Deputy Director Lee mentioned, Bo Li. In Costa Rica, from the perspective of a implementing minister of the policies of climate change, it is very good to get this kind of reform because it gets a non-traditional dialogue between the policy reform coming from the finance minister, which not only controls this loan, controls our whole budget. So it's very important to get into this, get the attention of the finance minister and this kind of reform. And we work in that reform very specifically. I think there were like 12 areas specified. Of the 12 that I see, I have been involved in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. The other ones have more to do with the Ministry of Housing, maybe another, but either energy or environment was involved, and with definitely a climate perspective. So,
Frans, thank you. Samba, we spoke before. You're happy for us to crack on with questions, so I'll go straight to Bo, and maybe Frans will come back to the relationship between the minister and the program. But Bo, maybe you could just talk us through how the RSC has progressed over the last 12 months. We spoke in Dubai, I think it was. You'll be doing well then. How have things progressed over the last 12 months?
Yeah, maybe I can quickly give you 3 updates. First, in the last 12 months, we have increased the number of countries from 11 to 20, and the total authorized credit has close to $10 billion. That was like doubling last year. And we have, in terms of fundraising, last year I told you we have $30 billion. Now we have $48 billion. So it's certainly a facility and an instrument that is growing fast. My second update is that we have seen in several countries successful crowding in of private capital. One example would be Rwanda. In Rwanda, we successfully help we means IMF together with our partners, World Bank, European Investment Bank, and other partners. We successfully helped to scale up Iremi Invest, which is a green blended facility launched by the government several years ago, we help the government to scale that up from 100 million to 400 million, successfully crowding in private capital. Another example is Barbados. Barbados is in the process of establishing a blue-green bank with the investment from both the government of Barbados and also from the Green Climate Fund and from the USAID. The government was able to use the fiscal space that we created through the RST for them. So the government is going to use part of that fiscal space to invest in this blue-green bank. And of course, with a $40 million capital in that bank will be able to leverage up by crowding in private capital. And the leverage ratio, I think the government is aiming for 3 to 5 times, which is very encouraging. So that's the second update. The third update I would give you is that in the past year, we have been very busy in terms of strengthening our collaboration with our partners like World Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, and also the World Health Organization. In terms of our collaboration with MDBs, we announced that with World Bank and also with the Inter-American Development Bank, and also recently with the Asian Development Bank, that we're going to work with them together in terms of designing a policy reform matrix together, in terms of joint diagnostics, in terms of joint technical assistance, and also in terms of joint effort in scaling up climate finance. And with the World Health Organization, we're also hoping to use RST to support not only climate reforms, but also in terms of pandemic preparedness. So we are looking forward to working with the first 1 or 2 countries on pandemic preparedness. I stop here.
Yeah, great, both. Thanks. I mean, I think we'd all love to come back to that concept of private sector involvement, which is a meta theme here at COP and has singularly been not very good for many, many, many years. So it'd be great to dig into that a bit deeper in a minute. But Franz, before we do, you're one of the first countries to exit the program. Maybe a perfect time for you to give some high-level thoughts around how successful it was for you.
Yeah, we, I think, completed many of the reforms. They were tailored around the country agenda together with the bank and the ministries that were involved. Very important. I would like to highlight some of them, which I think are very, very relevant. One is the project preparedness facility. I think it's for project preparation facility. This is what allows us to leverage more funds, and this is a very important reform that was supported. The other one that I think will have a lot of impact in the both adaptation but also in the mitigation is the establishing a shadow price for carbon and public investment evaluation of projects. This is Costa Rica follows a serious way to evaluate public investment by the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development, and then having a shadow price for the CO2. Costa Rica said is our shadow price at $40 per ton of CO2. It allows us, for example, to evaluate when a facility or a public investment has an alternative between A or B. If B has more emissions than A at $40, then we'll choose the one that has the lowest the internal rate of return accordingly adjusted for this shadow price of price. It's perfect. It's economy-wide, and it will regulate all the public investment. This is going to have a far-reaching impact. We are very happy as Ministry of Environment on this because now we have a stronger argument instead of using fossil fuel boilers in many of the public buildings. Now we can go directly to electricity. Costa Rica has a 100% renewable electricity matrix, so we would like to push the electricity, and now with $40 we can get all these projects being more profitable for the country. Second, another reform that I think is very important that we got, I'm going to highlight 2 of the 12. The other one that was very successful was getting reform so that the land regulation plans, the planning at the territorial level, take into account climate change to lower the risk and set a measure to adapt to climate change. And we have it now developed into the regulation that evaluate the regular planning reguladores. So our ministry, which has to look at the environmental impact of any plan, regulating plan of at the municipal level, Now we have, one, the tools to evaluate it from a climate change risk perspective, and we also, together with the authorities of our Meteorological Institute, develop a very sophisticated, more than 400 different municipalities in a small country, the climate risk of every of these territories against climate change. So, and this was possible thanks to this program. Of course, the country invests all resources on this, but this program is a leveraging investment and also got the attention of the Minister of Finance in these things, which for us is great.
Lovely, thanks, friends. I'd like to come back to you in a second and ask a bit more about the challenges you face. But before we do, Samba, Mauritania is just joining the program. Could you maybe talk a bit more at a high level about why you decided to do that?
Thank you. Yes, we just joined the program. In fact, we completed the first review. We just had a staff level agreement on the second. The reason why is obvious to us. It's not because of financing. It's really because that we want embedded structural reform in the climate area that we have joined the RCO. As you know, Mauritania is a very vast country, desertic country. We are subject to most of the climate, negative climate impact, drought, sometimes flood like recently after the heavy rain of the last rainy season. And we have a population that is hardly impacted by the negative shock. In fact, if we have time, we'll talk about even the shock program that we have put in place to protect those populations. For many of these reasons, and I have to say that Mauritania is not new to this. We have started almost 10 years ago by drafting all these enabling documents, joining all these initiatives like the Paris Agreement and so on climate. So for us, we thought that Mauritania was a very good candidate for that. And we have put in place all the measures and all the institutional support to make sure that we are successful with the RST program. In fact, we have, with this, the way we set up the governance of this program, achieved most of the measure, even of next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, Samba, maybe we could stay with you. Maybe before coming back to France for the challenges, could you talk a bit more about where you see the major challenges in Mauritania? And I'm curious about how long it took you just to get into this position. You know, how much effort is it for a country to enter into the RST program? And what are the big challenges for success for you, do you think?
Mauritania is not new to IMF programs. So we've been really implementing program for many decades, if I can say. And one of the reasons why we are really interested in, as I said earlier, because of all the climate challenges, but it was not obvious because in Mauritania we have 7 ministries that are involved in the design and the implementation of the RSC program. And we had to find, as I said earlier, a governance structure that would help really coordinate at, the chance, quote unquote, we had is that we found a high-level coordinator who has been a minister, that is me, and who spent more than 25 years in the fund, so knowing really how the fund operates and so on. And being an interface between the government and the technical committee, because we created a technical committee alongside of the ministerial committee to help really manage all this. We work on a daily basis. We have set up indicators. We set up a metrics that we discuss on a weekly basis with the staff, IMF staff, department, to help us really implement all those measures. So this is how really we got into it. And I think it, as I said earlier, it's not a matter of financing. It is really because we want all these structural changes. And this is done alongside an ECF program that help us also stabilize the macro situation.
Thank you. And Franz, maybe that's a perfect time to come to you, because clearly the RST provides money, long-term money, in a way that many others don't, but it does come with the obligation to make changes to policy, and as you know, better than me, that will straddle lots of different government departments, lots of fiefdoms. Trying to get everyone to move in the same direction for a common goal isn't always easy. Could you maybe talk us through how that played out in Costa Rica?
Yeah, I don't have the inside knowledge of how much better this is going to get us with the IMF, as Ambassador does, with the great experience on this. But I can tell you that what it does is definitely is a policy-based reform that is done by and promoted by the Minister of Finance, which is the one who oversees this reform in Costa Rica. And the Minister of Finance has very persuasive purse for policy reform in the ministries. And so I think it's very effective. And of course, it gets us into attention for other programs that are relevant. And then the dialogue is very rich, but that's in general. Now, in a specific, as I mentioned, this program, they are the policy reform that lowers the risk and has gotten adaptation a lot more focus now in the government, at the government level. And yeah, we estimate that we had losses equivalent to 3% of our GDP with climate-related impacts of climate-related events. Is it all climate change? No, but is it going to get worse? Yes. It's going to look like it? Yes. So that we prepare for this is very important. We have a very strong preparation, but this kind of deep level, long-term policy reforms are very critical. Right now, it's an emergency crisis. Right now, this week, very bad one in Costa Rica. It's a national emergency, red alert, countrywide almost, 90% of the country. How much impact is going to have? Huge. How much less impact would have had if we had reform to evaluate housing, to evaluate bridges, to evaluate public investment with a better climate risk perspective? Probably much less. This is the de-risking of the country. So that is the kind of impact that is going to have. From my minister perspective, we were very happy to have, we participate in all the meetings with the mission of the IMF comes to check out if we have checked the boxes. And yeah, we checked all the boxes. By the way, the RST program with Costa Rica is checked. We have all the reforms done, except two that require legal changes in the Congress, and we don't necessarily control the Congress. We are not a parliamentarian country, but the reforms are put forward in the country as a very good law for electricity production reform that will allow more private sector participation in the electricity market, and another one for creating an entity for a public-private partnerships that also require legislative reform according to the diagnostic that the specialists from the World Bank and the capacity building gave us.
Thanks, Franz. And that's a perfect segue, Bo, to the big prize here, which I guess is private sector money. I mean, with all the will in the world, the public sector isn't going to be able to fix every problem. We do need the private sector to get involved. They haven't done. What can other countries that are not in this program learn from the policy reforms as they plan their NDCs and go to market and try and get the private sector involved?
In terms of, as I said, the $1 trillion question, how to crowd in private capital, I think we have learned a lot in the last couple of years. Together with our partners, World Bank and other partners, there are several major impediments in terms of crowding private capital in developing countries, emerging market. The first one would be a lack of policy clarity, lack of policy predictability in some of the emerging markets and developing countries. The second obstacle would be a lack of a pipeline of bankable projects. And the first two, as you can hear, the first two impediments also relates to limited capacity of many of these countries. The last one I would say would be that the risk profile of many of these countries are simply too risky for private investors in terms of FX risk, in terms of sovereign credit risk, and in terms of credit risk and market risk. So given the high risk, given the lack of a pipeline, and also given the policy uncertainty, it is difficult for private sector to come in. So in order to crowd in private capital, we need to tackle each one of them one by one, policy reform to try to produce policy clarity, project preparation in terms of helping the country to build a pipeline, and also de-risking. We need to figure out how public sector money and public sector arrangement can support de-risking. And the good news is that in the last couple of years, many of the MDBs and IFIs, including IMF, we have experimented in a number of countries in terms of both policy reform, in terms of project preparation, but also in terms of de-risking. And I would say that each of the IFI and MDB have their respective strengths in this process. For example, for IMF, in our RSF program, RST program, we focus on policy reforms that can green their macro policy, green their budget, green their public financial management, green their public investment management. And that will also send a clear signal to the market that the government is serious about tackling climate change. Another part of the support from the RST is that we, in connection with the RST program, we provide technical assistance to help the countries to build capacity to do green policy, to green their fiscal policy and to green their financial system. And finally, in terms of the de-risking arrangement, we are creating fiscal space for the government to utilize. And they could utilize those fiscal space like the one in Rwanda and also in Barbados. The government utilized the fiscal space to invest in blended facilities that help partially de-risk for the private sector money to come in. So all these things, as you can see, the RST program is making its contribution to all the three pillars that I just mentioned in terms of policy reform, in terms of project preparation, and in terms of de-risking.
Great, thanks, Bert. I mean, clearly, there's no one silver bullet. We all wish there was. It's complicated, multifaceted. But France, as a country that's just finished the program, even at this early stage, is there anything you could share about the degree to which the private sector has been more willing to get involved now? Are you starting to see the signs of more engagement because of the process you've gone through?
Yes, for example, and we have a lot of support from the private sector on them. But not only from the private sector who wants to invest in the sector, also from the sector that is consumer of the sector in the electricity production reform. Costa Rica has been blessed with good policies about having a very renewable energy matrix for electricity. We are one of the most, if not the most renewable energy matrix in the world. But now we have the challenge that we're decarbonizing the rest of the economy. Now we are decarbonizing sectors that were not before, like transportation. And also our matrix is becoming now attractive for new investment. So we need to expand at rates that were unheard of for electricity. We need to expand. I'm the Minister of Energy as well of Costa Rica, so we need to expand probably well above the little rates of 2%, 1% expansion of the sector to rates maybe of 5 or 6%. We might need to 30% expansion in the next 5 or 6 years due to, yes, and this is going to be impossible without private sector investment in the electricity generation sector. And this has been very welcomed by the private sector, and the legislation is tough, getting new legislation, but it's going. The project is moving in the Congress, and we hope it moves soon. Hopefully this year we'll get it approved, and the reforms are coming in the private sector. That's one case. The other case is creating the fiscal space that Mr. Bowley mentioned. This fiscal space is felt in public investment by the ministries. If there is no fiscal space, the budgets are very tight in the country. So in this way, it benefits. In some of the cases, we do have some direct transfer to private sector, so it does benefit it. Also, the promotion of the regulating plans, I think, has also involved and bring the private sector more engaged into it. The reform on public transportation has been important as well. and that also will benefit private-public investment.
Great, thank you, Samba. Clearly early days. You know, when you speak to most global investors, or many of them, EM is, if they invest at all, it's a small bucket, and within that, infra is an even smaller bucket. So what are your hopes and expectations for private sector engagement with Mauritania after the end of this process?
As Mr. Boli said, we are greening the economy to make it possible. That is, I mean, our RST is set on 4 pillars. I left apart the social, but the public finance is being green because now there are conditions for the selection of investment project. We are developing a very intensive program in the water sector to allow also private sector to be part of the supply of water. The same in the electricity sector. With a change in the electricity code to allow private sector to be investor and produce and sell to the grid. But it is very, very timid as of now. And really what we hope is that when they look at the effort the government is doing, we are operationalizing now the NDC, and we have just completed the first preparation of 13 projects, green project in which the private sector can be part. We are going to present that very soon, and we hope that it will at least attract some of them locally or internationally to participate in some of the green projects in Mauritania. But the funding needs are immense, and I think this COP has a challenge before it, is how really to finance all these green projects and how to attract more international private sector too to this country. As you know, we are developing now our gas field, and we have a large investor in the gas field, and we are trying also to see how we can put all this green conditionality within the production of liquefied natural gas to make sure that it will be protective for everyone. And I will finish by saying that we are also developing large green hydrogen project. It is really in the early stage, but we have seen the arrival in Mauritania is very big private companies. We will see down the road in 5-7 years how it will unfold.
Lovely, thank you. And before we go to Q&A, Bo, maybe the last word for you, spin it forward into the next 12 months. What would, well, actually, to start with this COP, what does success look like for you, writ large? And then for the RST for the next 12 months, where are you hoping to get to?
Well, in terms of what success looks like, you know, we think that this is a finance COP. So we think if countries can agree on a, you know, NCQG that is substantially higher than the $100 billion of the, you know, the previous decade, that would be one success. Another success would be that if countries can agree also on specific, you know, international collaboration in terms of supporting developing countries and low-income countries in terms of scaling up climate finance through crowding private capital, you know, through institutional organizations like IFIs and MDBs. That will also be a success. For RST, you know, we have several things planned for the next 1 year. One is we're going to look at how to assess the impact of RST. More specifically, we need to track the progress, but also design a specific metric that we can measure the performance of RST program. Another thing we need to do, as I mentioned, is that we need to work on some early countries on pandemic preparedness through our RST program. We also plan to do a comprehensive review of RST next year, so we can stock take and also try to figure out, you know, what we did well and what can be done better. And finally, we'll continue to do fundraising because there's such a strong demand. We have approved 20 countries so far, but we still have around 30 more countries in waiting. So we need more funding for this RST. So we'll continue to do fundraising.
How much more funding would you like? I mean, clearly as much as you can get, but if you had to pluck a number out to try and get a good slug of those 30 in the system, what would it be?
Right now we have 48. It would be nice if we can reach 80 billion, hopefully in the next 1 or 2 years, because given the strong demand.
Great, thank you. Cool, time for Q&A. If anyone's got a question, please raise your hand and just let us know where you're from. That would be great. Or I can go for another one if no one's got a question. Please.
Hi, I'm Eva from the African Climate Foundation. The areas you described that you focus and work on, policy reform, project preparation, bringing in private sector, are the areas we are working on as well. I wonder, what role do you see for collaboration with the philanthropic sector, and especially the kind of philanthropic organizations that can do that at a systemic level to really improve capacity in countries to mobilize philanthropic capital to de-risk and so on? Thank you.
I can start, and I'm sure Minister and Ambassador also have something to add. I see we see a number of philanthropists very active on climate. I see at least several areas that philanthropists can play an important role. One is project preparation. For example, in Costa Rica, there is a project preparation facility, and the funding of that facility mainly come from donor money, including philanthropy. So I would think philanthropy can support a lot of project preparation facility. Another thing I think philanthropy can help on is on some of the climate infrastructure, such as data, disclosure. I know a couple of philanthropists are working with some African countries on improving some of the basic climate disclosure, climate data, architecture. All those infrastructure, again, require donor money sometimes, and also require TA. And some of the philanthropists are very good at providing specific TAs in specific areas. But I will give the floor also to the Minister and to the Ambassador.
Yes, philanthropy will be very important probably when you are dealing with small-scale businesses or agriculture or a smaller scale. When you hear that the developing countries are risky, and they're going to become riskier because of climate change, that's very very strong words for developing countries, because attracting private investment on those regions is difficult. But even at the small scale, the investment for adapting to climate change is different. In this fora here, in the COP, in the Climate Change Convention, there's a lot of knowledge about climate change, very sophisticated knowledge. Very sophisticated knowledge about the projections of climate change, how is it going to go. We can get it at the level of a small municipal in Costa Rica now. We can assess the risk of climate events. This is very sophisticated knowledge. We have knowledge of long-setting events of climate change, also which regions are going to go drier in the next 10, 20 years. And that's going to risk a whole sector, maybe coffee production, for example, which we have 80,000 families, maybe 80,000 farmers, but translating this risk to the farmer level, that they should borrow money to change their production package to one that is resilient, that maybe the technology is there, but who's going to de-risk the loans? Who's going to? Because the proposition is you have ultimately the risk of the investment for climate resilient is being taken at the farmer level, for example. That's where the risk is being taken, if we go just with the technological package. However, the markets are not there yet to say, well, no, in the long run, the country is going to be able to pay its loans back to the different banks or to the different investments at the other level. I think that's a good role for philanthropy. I think there is a lot of de-risking of the loans that need to be taken for the private sector to invest in making more resilient economic sectors, which are still operated by independent producers. I think that's one role. And also, I think it was mentioned by Mr. Boli, the information sharing. It doesn't get down. I mean, knowledge, you cannot expect that the sophistication of knowledge that the NGOs have or that philanthropy has, because they come to these COPs and they know what the weather models are coming, is this information really made transparently available to everyone so that the decisions can be made more informed decisions? Multinationals are doing it. The private sector at the multinational level has the level of sophistication to build into their decision-making adaptation to climate change. Is that at all levels? Is that information freely provided, really, even if it is available? That's a good role for philanthropy as well, because that's going to require some grant money of some sort.
Thank you. And Samba, maybe if you'd had any thoughts on that.
Just very briefly. I mean, for developing countries like us, our expectation is bigger. We really hope to access larger financing to support government efforts in tackling climate change. But despite that, in Mauritania, we have granted, allocated, or given freely 1/3 of our coastal area to the world, to the rest of the world, to make sure that biodiversity can be protected. And this is done to be able to attract private philanthropists. And some of them are showing, but it is really, as Mr. Minister said, at a very micro level compared to the rest of the economy, but it is still an avenue to prospect.
Great, thank you. I think we've got time for one very quick question, gentleman at the front. If you could just say where you're from, and if you have a particular person you'd like to answer it, if you could direct it to them.
Sure, yeah, thanks very much. I work at Aviva Investors, so we are institutional investors in emerging market debt, sovereign debt included. So we're always interested to hear about finance provision that can create fiscal space or reduce sovereign risk. You mentioned technical assistance and the policy reforms that come with the programs. And we also mentioned briefly NDCs, and there's been lots of talks at this COP about investable NDCs. Is there an intention to provide technical assistance on NDCs and also include some of the policy reforms, including RSTs, reflect those in NDCs or accompanying documents too? It would be great to hear from you on that, Boli.
Well, for IMF, our technical system focuses on, as I said, macroeconomic policy and macro-financial policy, like fiscal, financial. So we will be happy to work with countries in the context of NDC, how to make their, for example, public financial management in the context of the NDC, how to design, for example, their fiscal policy, how to green their budget. Those part of macro fiscal policy that are relevant for NDC will be part of the TA, right? So we can help them to think about how to use their fiscal policy to support their NDC, how to use their financial policy to support their NDC. So as long as, NDCs that, those aspects of NDC that are relevant for macro fiscal policy and for financial policy, I think we can provide TA.
Franz, please.
Referred to that question as well. I think, yes, definitely through this program of the RST, Costa Rica is now developing sovereign thematic bond strategy linked to the SDGs, to the Sustainable Development Goals, and to the NDCs together, both. So this will be a way of contributing to bring more financing from the private investors, and also the issuance of sustainability-linked bonds, which will be more to do with the Sustainable Development Goals, and will get us into areas like health and education, which not only will need fiscal space, but need real investment. So, yes, we are seeing that move that way through this program.
Samba, any thoughts on that?
Yes, just to echo what Minister said, that I'm chairing the National Hydrocarbon Fund, and we are working now to transform it to make sure that it will really be transiting through something more greener, and we use part of it as the NDC technical assistance. And as Mr. Boli said, that we take from IMF, but we have also other partners who are helping on other aspects of the NDC. We have selected in Mauritania six ministerial departments that will be a pilot test, and we will see in a matter of a year how it will unfold. Thank you.
Great. Bo, Franz, Samba, thanks ever so much for your time this morning. It's been really interesting, and to the audience as well. Thanks very much, and a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.